An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643, the most influential work in the Science of Hadith ever. Number 3. When someone who has memorized a text finds in his book something in conflict with what he memorized, the matter is examined. If he memorized the text from that book, let him go back to what is in his book. If he memorized it from the mouth of the transmitter, let him rely on his memory rather than on what is in the book. When he has no doubts about his recollection of it, it is a good idea for him to mention the two versions in his relation, saying, "My recollection is such and such, and in my book is such and such." That is what Shu'bah and others did. Likewise, when another person who memorized the text contradicts him regarding what he memorized, let him say, "My recollection is such and such, and X said it for such and such, or someone else said such and such for it," or some other phrases like that. That is what Sufyan al-Thawri and others did. God knows best. Number 4. When a transmitter finds a record of his audition in his book and he does not remember having heard it, it is reported that Abu Hanifa, God bless him, and some of the followers of Shafi'i, God bless him, did not permit the transmitter to relate the book. The doctrine of Shafi'i and most of his followers, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, is that he permitted to transmit it. This disagreement ought to be addressed in the light of the disagreement just treated above over the permissibility of the transmitter relying on his book to retain what he heard. Retain being dabt. Retaining the text used in the audition is like retaining the material actually heard. The correct view, and that of the majority of the scholars of Hadith, is to permit reliance on well-guarded books to retain the material heard. Thus, the transmitter is permitted to relate the contents, even if he does not recall each and every Hadith in it. So let that be true. If the following condition is met, the record of audition must be in his handwriting or in the handwriting of someone likely to be free from the touch of forgery and alteration, in the fashion previously described for that. This applies when he has no doubts about it and has no qualms regarding its correctness. If he does have doubts about it, reliance on the book is not permitted. God knows best. 5. When the student wants to relate what he has heard in paraphrase rather than verbatim, if he is not a scholar who is knowledgeable in words and what they mean, familiar with what changes their sense and in possession of insight into the shades of difference between them, there is no disagreement that he is not permitted to do that. He should relate what he heard only in the same terms in which he heard it, without any alteration. The permissibility of this, if he is a scholar who is knowledgeable in these matters, is one of the things the pious forebears, the scholars of Hadith, and the great authorities in practical and theoretical law have disagreed about. Some of the transmitters of Hadith, certain Shafi'i experts in positive and theoretical law and others permitted it. Some of them forbade it for the Hadith of the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, and allowed it for other material. The most correct view is to permit it for everything. If the transmitter knows what he described and states plainly what he is passing on, the sense of words which reached him, because that is what the affairs of the companions and early forebears testify to, they used to permit to transmit a single notion about a particular matter with different words, and that was only because they relied on the sense rather than the wording. We do not think that this disagreement is active anymore, and people do not practice transmission by paraphrase, so far as we know, with the contents of books. No one has the right to alter the wording of anything in an authored book and replace it with another word having the same meaning. Rather, those who permitted transmission by paraphrasing did so on account of the difficulty and hardship faced by the companions and early forebears in rendering the words exactly and rigidly sticking to them. That problem does not exist for the contents of papers and books, because even if someone does possess the authority to change a spoken word, he does not possess the authority to change the composition of someone else. God knows best. Number 6. Someone who paraphrases a hadith should say after it, or however he put it, "O kama qal," or something like that, "O nahu hada," and similar expressions. That practice was related from the companion Ibn Mas'ud, Abu Darda, and Anas ibn Malik. God be pleased with them. Al-Khatib said the companions were masters of language and they were the most knowledgeable in semantics. They used these expressions only out of fear of error on account of their recognition of the danger inherent in transmission by paraphrasing. Whenever someone reciting a text comes across something that seems obscure to him, he should read the dubious form and then say, "or however he put it." This is a good idea and is the correct course in a matter like this, because the transmitters licensing the student and permitting him to relate the correct form from him when it becomes evident are inherent in his saying, or however he put it. It is not necessary for the transmitter to pronounce the license specifically for the doubtful reading, for the reason we just explained. God knows best. Number 7. It is permissible to abridge a hadith and transmit only parts of it. Scholars disagree about that. Some forbid it outright on the basis of the doctrine of absolutely forbidding transmission by paraphrasing. Some forbid it despite allowing transmission by paraphrasing. When the transmitter has related the hadith in its complete form at some other time, and it's not known that someone else related it in its complete form, some permit it without any restrictions and make no distinctions. Indeed, we heard that Mujahid said, "Leave out whatever you want from a hadith, but never add anything to it." The correct approach is to make a distinction. Abridging is permissible for a knowledgeable and informed transmitter when what he emits can be separated from what he transmits and is not dependent on it, so that the meaning does not become defective and the legal point of what he transmits is not altered by the omission. This should be permitted, even if transmission by paraphrasing is not permitted, because under these circumstances, the parts he omits and the part which he relates are tantamount to two separate reports on two matters, neither dependent on the other. This applies if the transmitter's stature is so elevated that an accusation will not be lodged against him for transmitting it first completely and then in shortened form, or for transmitting it first in shortened form and then completely. If his stature is not so elevated, the expert Khatib has said that whoever relates a hadith in its complete form and is afraid that if he relates it another time with an omission, he will be accused of having the first time added something he had not heard of having the second time forgotten the rest of the hadith on the account of his lack of precision and his propensity to err, must banish this suspicion from himself. The authority jurist Abul Fath Sulaym ibn Ayyub al-Razi said that this constitutes an excuse to omit and conceal the addition for whoever relates part of a report and then wants to relate it completely. If he is one of those who will be accused of having added something to his hadith, in my opinion, someone like this should not from the start relate hadith incompletely, if he has been enjoined to give it completely. This is because if he initially relates it incompletely, he excludes the rest of it for being cited as a proof. He ends up oscillating between not relating it at all, thereby forfeiting it entirely, and relating it and being accused of putting a false addition in it. For doing so, thereby wasting any benefit from it, because of the destruction of its value as a proof. Knowledge belongs to God. He is exalted. If an author breaks up the text of a single hadith and distributes its parts under various legal topics in his book, it is closer to being permitted and further from being forbidden. Indeed, Malik, Bukhari, and more than one of the other authorities in hadith did that, although it is not completely unreprehensible. God knows best. Number 8. A transmitter should not relate his hadith through the recitation of someone prone to grammatical mistakes and misreading. We heard that Nadar ibn Shumayl, God be pleased with him, said, "Originally these hadith came in good Arabic. Abu Bakr or Abu al-Fath or Abu al-Qasim or Abu Ma'ali al-Furawi informed us by recitation." He said, "My great-grandfather, the authority Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Fadl al-Furawi informed us." He said, "Abu al-Hussein Abdul Ghaffar ibn Muhammad al-Farisi informed us." He said, "The authority Abu Sulaiman Hamd ibn Muhammad al-Khattabi informed us." He said, "Muhammad ibn Mu'adh transmitted to me." He said, "One of our teachers informed us." From Abu Dawood as-Sinji, he said, Al-Asma'i said, "The greatest fear I have for a student of hadith is, if he does not know grammar, is that he fall under the general designation of the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him, whoever ascribes a lie to me, let him take his seat in hell, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not make grammatical mistakes. Whenever they relate a hadith from him and make a grammatical mistake in it, you ascribe a lie to him." The student of hadith has a duty to learn enough grammar and lexicography to avoid the shame and ignominy of grammatical mistakes and miswriting. We heard that Shu'bah said, "Whoever studies hadith and does not comprehend the Arabic language is like someone who wears a burnous without a hood," or however he put it. He said that Hammad ibn Salama said, "Someone who studies hadith and does not know grammar is like a donkey wearing a nose bag with no barley in it." The way to avoid misreading it is to take hadith from the mouth of the people possessing knowledge and accuracy. Whoever is deprived of that and instead takes and learns his hadith from books is likely to corrupt the hadith and is unable to keep from changing and misreading the hadith. God knows best. Stay tuned.